Lifelong learning is a journey that never truly ends. From the moment we are born until our final days, we are constantly taking in information, adapting to new challenges, and discovering fresh perspectives. What makes lifelong learning so beautiful is that it doesn't have to be tied to grades, degrees, or certifications. Instead, it becomes a personal adventure, something that enriches the spirit, keeps the mind alive, and adds meaning to every stage of life. One of the greatest joys of lifelong learning is the freedom it gives us. Unlike school years, where subjects are chosen for us, we get to decide what sparks our curiosity as adults. Some may find joy in learning how to paint landscapes, while others dive into gardening, technology, or even philosophy. That freedom transforms learning from an obligation into a choice, and that choice makes the process deeply satisfying. As I look back on my own life, I realize how much learning has shaped me. When I was younger, I thought education ended once I left the classroom. But in my later years, I discovered that the most rewarding lessons came long after formal schooling ended. Learning to cook new dishes, trying my hand at writing, or even picking up a new language showed me that growth isn't something reserved for the young. It's available to anyone with an open heart and mind. There's also a powerful emotional beauty in learning something new later in life. It reminds us that we are never stuck in place no matter how old we are. Each new skill learned feels like proof that time has not diminished our abilities but has instead given us patience, perspective, and resilience. Even small victories, like finally mastering how to use a smartphone app, carry a sense of pride that uplifts the soul. Another part of this beauty lies in the way learning connects us with others. A shared class, a book discussion, or even a casual conversation about a new hobby can lead to friendships we never expected. I've seen people form lifelong bonds simply because they were curious enough to sign up for the same activity. In this way, learning becomes not just a personal act but a social one, weaving people together across generations and backgrounds. Science also tells us that continuous learning supports our well-being. It keeps our brains sharp, improves memory, and even lowers the risk of age-related decline. But beyond the science, there is a feeling, a spark, that comes alive each time we challenge ourselves with something new. That spark is what keeps us feeling youthful inside, even as the years pass by. Of course, lifelong learning isn't about mastering everything or becoming perfect. It's about the joy of the process itself. Struggling with new concepts, making mistakes, and gradually improving all bring their own rewards. The imperfections remind us we are human, still growing, and still capable of transformation. That humility is part of the beauty as well. Ultimately, the beauty of lifelong learning is that it teaches us to see the world with fresh eyes. Each new skill or piece of knowledge adds depth to our lives and helps us appreciate the richness of being alive. It is proof that growth has no deadline and that our minds and spirits can continue to flourish at any age. For me, this realization has been one of life's greatest gifts, a reminder that curiosity is timeless and learning is forever. For far too long, society has carried the idea that education belongs only to the young. We are told that childhood and early adulthood are the prime years for learning, and that once we reach a certain age, our role is to simply settle into routines. But this belief is outdated and untrue. The reality is that our brains continue to adapt and change throughout our lives. In fact, many older adults discover that they are more motivated and disciplined learners than they ever were in their youth. When I was younger, learning often felt like an obligation, a box to check, a requirement to fulfill. But now, in later life, I find learning to be a choice I embrace with joy. There is no pressure to pass exams or compete with others. Instead, there is freedom to learn at my own pace and to choose subjects that truly inspire me. That freedom itself proves the myth wrong. Age doesn't limit learning, it makes it more meaningful. Another myth is that older adults cannot retain new information as well as the young. While it's true that memory may slow down, the depth of understanding we bring to new topics is often far richer. We connect ideas with decades of life experience, which gives learning greater context and depth. I remember joining a history discussion group at 70. While younger members knew the facts, I could relate events to moments I had lived through. My age gave me insight, not disadvantage. Fear of failure also feeds the myth that learning is for the young. Many seniors hesitate to try new things because they fear looking foolish. I felt this myself when I first attended a computer class filled with people half my age. At first, I struggled, fumbling with the keyboard and feeling embarrassed. But over time, I realized my classmates respected my determination, not my mistakes. In fact, some even admired my courage for starting something new later in life. Breaking the myth of age and education also requires looking at examples around us. We've all heard stories of people earning college degrees in their 70s, 80s, or even 90s. These stories aren't rare miracles. They are proof that learning is a human ability, not a privilege of the young. Each of these examples shows us that education has no expiration date. What's more, learning later in life can feel even more rewarding. As older adults, we often savor experiences more deeply. A young person may rush through a new hobby without much reflection, but an older learner takes joy in every small achievement. I still remember the pride I felt when I finally managed to play a simple song on the piano after weeks of practice. That small moment carried more meaning than any school award I received in my youth. The truth is, the only thing that can stop us from learning at any age is the belief that we can't. Once we let go of that myth, doors begin to open everywhere. Libraries, online courses, community centers. All of these resources welcome learners of all ages. The myth of age and education disappears the moment we take the first step into a new class or pick up a new. In the end, breaking this myth is about changing our mindset. Instead of asking, "Am I too old to learn this?" we should ask, "How much joy could this bring me if I tried?" That small shift transforms learning into an adventure available to anyone at any stage of life. Age does not close the door to knowledge. It simply gives us a richer way to walk through it. When I reached my mid-60s, I thought most of my great adventures were behind me. Retirement had arrived, my days felt slower, and I began to wonder if there was anything new left for me to experience. Then one morning, I sat listening to a piece of classical music on the radio and thought, what if I could play something like that myself? It was a small spark of curiosity, but it grew into a decision that would change my life. I decided to learn the piano. At first, the idea felt almost foolish. I wondered, can someone my age really start from scratch? My fingers were stiff. My memory wasn't as sharp, and I certainly didn't expect to play like a professional. But I reminded myself that the goal wasn't perfection. It was simply to try. So, I signed up for lessons with a local teacher who had the patience of an angel and the gift of encouragement. The early days were humbling. I fumbled with the keys, mixed up the notes, and sometimes felt frustrated when my hands couldn't keep up with my mind. But each small improvement gave me joy. The first time I managed to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star without stopping, I laughed out loud like a child. It reminded me that learning isn't about where you end up, it's about the joy of progress along the way. What surprised me most was how much the piano awakened other parts of my life. It gave my morning structure, it challenged my brain in new ways, and it even improved my mood. My family noticed I was more energetic and optimistic. My grandchildren would gather around, cheering me on, and sometimes even played alongside me. What began as a personal goal became a source of connection with the people I love. Learning the piano also helped me rediscover patience. In youth, I often rushed through life, always eager for quick results. But sitting at the piano each day taught me that growth takes time. There is beauty in slowing down, repeating a piece until the notes finally come together. That lesson, I realized, applied not only to music but also to life itself. Along the way, I discovered something deeper. Learning late in life isn't just about gaining a skill, it's about gaining confidence. Every time I mastered a song, no matter how simple, I proved to myself that age didn't define my abilities. That confidence spread into other areas. Soon, I found myself more open to new experiences, whether it was learning how to use a new app or trying out a creative writing class. I share this story not because everyone needs to learn the piano, but because it shows how a small spark of curiosity can lead to unexpected joy. Whether it's gardening, painting, cooking, or even tackling technology, starting something new brings a sense of purpose. The journey itself is what matters. Looking back now, I see that my personal journey with learning late in life has been one of the most rewarding chapters of my story. It reminded me that growth doesn't stop with age. It evolves. Every new skill becomes a symbol of resilience, proof that we can always reinvent ourselves, no matter where we are in life's timeline. One of the greatest gifts of lifelong learning is the way it nourishes the mind. Curiosity acts like exercise for the brain, keeping it active and flexible no matter how many candles are on the birthday cake. Just as our muscles grow stronger with use, our minds remain sharper when we continue to challenge them with new ideas, skills, and perspectives. Curiosity doesn't just make life more interesting, it helps preserve our mental well-being. Research has shown that engaging in new learning can actually strengthen the connections between brain cells. This means that even as we age, the brain has the ability to adapt and rewire itself. I've often thought of this as a kind of mental gardening. Each new skill or piece of knowledge is like planting a fresh seed, keeping the soil of the mind rich and alive. Without curiosity, the garden grows stale. With it, the mind blooms in vibrant ways. In my own life, I noticed a remarkable difference when I stayed curious. For a time after retirement, I slipped into a routine that felt repetitive, reading the same newspapers, watching the same programs, talking about the same topics. My memory began to feel slower, and my days blended together. But once I started learning new things again, like cooking new recipes or exploring history books I had never touched before, I felt an immediate spark. My memory improved, and I had fresh stories to share at family dinners. Curiosity also helps fight off one of the greatest challenges of aging: boredom. Too often, older adults are told to slow down or take it easy. But when the mind isn't engaged, the days can feel long and empty. Learning something new, even something small, adds purpose to each day. I remember the excitement I felt when I learned how to navigate email properly. It may sound simple, but suddenly I could connect with old friends, join online groups, and discover endless information at my fingertips. Beyond memory and focus, curiosity also brings emotional benefits. Staying mentally active can reduce stress and anxiety, giving us a sense of accomplishment and control. I often found that when I was immersed in a new hobby, I forgot about my worries. The concentration it required gave me a kind of peace, almost like meditation. In this way, learning becomes not only a mental exercise but also a form of self-care. Another powerful benefit is the sense of identity it gives us. When we remain curious, we see ourselves not as people who are finished, but as people still growing. That mindset alone keeps us mentally young. I recall a dear friend in her 80s who began studying Spanish just for fun. She often joked, "If I ever go to Spain, I'll be ready." But in truth, her joy came from knowing she was still capable of change. Her laughter and enthusiasm were contagious, and her curiosity made her feel decades younger. Curiosity also strengthens relationships. When we learn new things, we bring fresh energy into conversations with friends and family. Instead of dwelling only on past memories, we add new topics and ideas to share. My grandchildren love when I tell them about the podcasts I listen to or the articles I've read. It keeps me connected to their world while giving them a glimpse into mine. Ultimately, the mental benefits of staying curious reach far beyond memory or knowledge. Curiosity is what gives life color and depth. It keeps us awake to the world, eager for what tomorrow might bring. No matter how old we are, curiosity assures us that our journey isn't over. It's still unfolding, one new lesson at a time. One of the greatest barriers to lifelong learning isn't ability, it's fear. Many of us hesitate to try something new because we're afraid of failing, of looking foolish, or of being reminded of our limitations. That fear can be so strong that it stops us before we even begin. Yet the truth is, every learner, whether young or old, faces uncertainty when starting out. The only difference is whether we let fear silence our curiosity or allow courage to guide us forward. I remember vividly the first time I walked into a community photography class. Everyone else seemed younger, confident, and familiar with the equipment. I, on the other hand, didn't even know how to turn the camera on properly. For a moment, I wanted to turn around and leave. But I stayed, fumbling my way through the lesson, and little by little, I learned. Looking back, I'm grateful I didn't let fear push me out the door that day, because photography later became one of my greatest joys. Fear often whispers that it's too late. Too late to learn a language, too late to try a hobby, too late to go back to school. But what I've discovered is that too late is just an illusion. Whether you're 60, 70, or 90, there's always time to start something new. The moment we begin, the fear loses its power. Each small success, like playing a single song, finishing a painting, or mastering a new recipe, reminds us that growth is possible at any age. Another reason fear holds us back is comparison. We look at others who seem more skilled, faster, or younger, and we convince ourselves that we'll never measure up. But the truth is, learning is not a race. It's not about being the best. It's about discovering joy in the process. When I began learning to swim again after decades, I wasn't the fastest in the pool, but I was the happiest. Every stroke felt like a victory because it was mine. It's also important to remember that mistakes are part of the journey. In fact, they are proof that we're trying. I used to dread making errors, especially in front of others. But with time, I realized mistakes are not signs of weakness. They're stepping stones. Each time I pressed the wrong piano key or misunderstood a computer shortcut, I learned something new. Those mistakes became part of my progress. Support can make all the difference when facing fear. When friends or family encourage us, or when we join a group of learners who share the same struggles, we realize we're not alone. I found great comfort in a writing circle I joined, where everyone admitted their insecurities openly. Knowing that others were just as nervous helped me push past my own doubts. The real triumph comes not from mastering the skill but from conquering the fear itself. Every time we push through that hesitation, we prove to ourselves that courage is still alive within us. That feeling of bravery often lasts longer than the skill we're learning. It becomes a reminder that we are capable of more than we thought. In the end, overcoming the fear of starting something new is about trusting the process. We don't have to be perfect. We only have to begin. And once we take that first step, the fear begins to shrink, replaced by excitement, growth, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing we dared to try. For many older adults, technology can feel like an intimidating wall. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, apps, all of these can seem overwhelming at first glance. I used to look at a phone with dozens of icons and think, this is too much for me. But over time, I realized that technology isn't a wall at all. It's a gateway. It opens doors to connection, learning, and opportunities that enrich our lives in countless ways. My first real experience with embracing technology came when my daughter showed me how to make a video call. Until then, I had relied on letters and occasional phone conversations to connect with family. The day I first saw my grandchildren's smiling faces live on a screen, I knew I had stepped into a new world. Suddenly, distance didn't feel so large and I felt more present in their daily lives. That single experience taught me that learning technology is worth every moment of effort. At first, the process was frustrating. I pressed the wrong buttons, forgot passwords, and sometimes lost my way in the maze of menus. But I reminded myself of all the times in life I had learned something new, driving a car, cooking a new recipe, even raising children. None of those things came easily, but they were worth learning. Technology, I realized, was just another skill waiting to be mastered with patience and persistence. One of the greatest gifts of technology is access to information. With a few taps, I can read about world history, find cooking tutorials, watch documentaries, or even take free online courses. For someone who values lifelong learning, this is nothing short of extraordinary. The library of the world is now in our pockets, waiting to be explored. What once required hours in a library can now be discovered in seconds on a phone or computer. Technology also helps us stay socially connected. Loneliness is a challenge many older adults face, but technology offers ways to bridge that gap. Social media platforms, online communities, and group video calls allow us to share stories, photos, and conversations with loved ones and even meet new friends. I joined an online book club and was surprised by how much joy it brought me to discuss novels with people across the country. Beyond connection and knowledge, technology opens doors to creativity. Digital photography, writing blogs, recording music, or even learning how to edit videos. All of these creative outlets are now accessible with simple tools. I've met retirees who became passionate online content creators, sharing their wisdom with the world. Their courage to embrace technology not only gave them purpose but also inspired others. Of course, patience is key when learning something new in the digital world. There will always be updates, changes, and new devices. But instead of viewing this as a burden, I try to see it as a reminder that life is always evolving. Each update gives us a chance to practice adaptability, to prove once again that age doesn't hold us back. In the end, technology should not be feared, it should be embraced as a gift. It is a bridge that connects generations, a tool for learning, and a way to keep our minds sharp. What once felt like a wall now feels like a door, wide open, waiting for us to step through. The beauty of lifelong learning is that it reminds us we can adapt, we can grow, and yes, even in our later years we can thrive in a digital world. While learning on your own can be deeply rewarding, there is something uniquely powerful about learning with others. Being part of a group creates encouragement, accountability, and joy that you simply cannot replicate in solitude. I've found that the friendships formed in learning communities often become just as valuable as the skills themselves. In fact, sometimes the laughter, conversations, and shared struggles are what make the experience unforgettable. I still remember joining a local creative writing group at the community center. At first, I was nervous. I hadn't written anything in years and I worried my words wouldn't measure up. But as soon as we began sharing stories, I realized everyone was there to learn, not to compete. We supported each other, celebrated small victories, and gave gentle feedback. Those evenings weren't just about writing, they were about connection, belonging, and the simple joy of learning together. Learning with others also creates accountability. When you're part of a class or group, you're more likely to stay committed. I discovered this when I joined a Tai Chi class. On mornings when I felt lazy, the thought of my classmates waiting for me pushed me to get up and go. Over time, those friendships made the practice something I looked forward to, not just an obligation. The social bond turned learning into a habit. Another benefit of group learning is that we can lean on each other's strengths. In every group I've joined, someone always knew a little more than I did and someone else was just starting out. That mix created an environment where teaching and learning flowed naturally. Sometimes I was the one being helped, and other times I had the chance to guide others. Both roles were fulfilling and reminded me that knowledge is most powerful when shared. The friendships that blossom from learning communities often extend beyond the classroom. I've made friends in cooking classes who later invited me to dinner, and walking group companions who became travel partners. The activity that first brought us together became the foundation for lifelong connections. These friendships are proof that learning is not just about acquiring skills, it's about building relationships that enrich our lives. Community learning also helps us feel less isolated. As we grow older, it's easy to retreat into routines and solitude. But stepping into a group activity reminds us that we are not alone on this journey. We are surrounded by others who also seek growth, purpose, and joy. That sense of togetherness can be incredibly healing, especially during times when loneliness feels overwhelming. What's beautiful is that communities of learning are everywhere. Libraries, senior centers, online classes, local clubs, or even informal gatherings of neighbors. Wherever people come together with curiosity, a community of learners is born. It doesn't matter whether the subject is painting, fitness, or literature. The shared experience is what creates the magic. Ultimately, learning through community and friendship reminds us that education is not just about knowledge, it's about connection. When we learn together, we grow together. We lift each other up, celebrate progress, and find companionship along the way. And sometimes the greatest lesson isn't about the skill we set out to learn. It's about the friendships we gain in the process. One of the most fulfilling parts of lifelong learning is the chance to pass on what you've discovered to others. Learning isn't just about keeping knowledge to ourselves. It becomes even more powerful when it's shared. Teaching, whether formal or informal, gives us a sense of purpose and allows our hard-earned lessons to live on in the hearts of others. I experienced this joy when I first learned how to bake homemade bread. At the beginning, I struggled with the measurements and kneading, but once I mastered it, I wanted to share that knowledge. I invited my grandson into the kitchen and taught him the steps. His excitement as he shaped the dough and watched it rise in the oven was contagious. That simple act of passing on my new skill deepened our bond and made my learning journey all the more rewarding. Teaching doesn't have to mean standing in front of a classroom. It can be as simple as showing a neighbor how to use a smartphone app, helping a friend with gardening tips, or sharing stories from history with younger generations. Each small exchange of knowledge has the power to light a spark in someone else, inspiring them to keep learning too. There is also a special satisfaction in realizing that our struggles can help others. When I first started using email, I made every mistake possible. But later, when a friend admitted she was overwhelmed by technology, I was able to guide her through the same hurdles I had faced. The frustration I once felt turned into compassion and encouragement, and I discovered that teaching often comes from understanding the challenges of learning firsthand. Teaching also gives us a deeper mastery of what we've learned. Explaining a skill or concept to someone else forces us to think clearly, practice patience, and organize our knowledge in a way that makes sense. In this way, teaching isn't just a gift to others, it strengthens our own understanding. Every time I helped a fellow classmate in my writing group, I felt my own skills sharpen in the process. Another beautiful aspect of teaching is the ripple effect it creates. When we share our knowledge, the person we teach often goes on to share it with someone else. A recipe passed down, a craft demonstrated, a life lesson told, all of these can travel far beyond us, touching lives we may never even meet. In this way, teaching becomes a legacy, a piece of ourselves carried forward through the generations. The joy of teaching also lies in the connection it creates. Every time I've taught someone, no matter how small the lesson, I felt closer to them. Knowledge becomes a bridge between people, fostering trust, respect, and appreciation. Sharing what we know is one of the most human acts we can offer. It shows generosity, humility, and care. Ultimately, the joy of teaching what you learn is about giving back. Learning enriches our own lives, but teaching extends that enrichment outward. It reminds us that we are part of a larger community of learners, all helping each other grow. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: the more we share, the more our knowledge and our joy multiplies. As we grow older, many people begin to see their identity as fixed. They think of themselves in terms of their past roles, parent, worker, spouse, and forget that identity can continue to evolve. Learning challenges that notion. Each new skill, each new interest, adds another layer to who we are. It reminds us that identity is not something we leave behind in youth. It is something we can keep shaping throughout our lives. When I picked up the piano late in life, I stopped thinking of myself only as retired and started seeing myself as a musician in the making. Even though I was a beginner, that small shift gave me a new sense of self. It was liberating to realize I wasn't defined only by my age or my past achievements, but also by the new paths I was exploring. Learning in that way gave me a fresh identity that energized me. This process is deeply empowering because it helps us resist society's tendency to reduce older adults to stereotypes. Too often, people assume that seniors are no longer capable of change, that we are stuck in our ways. But every time we learn something new, we break that stereotype, not only for others but for ourselves. We prove that we are dynamic, adaptable, and still evolving. Another way learning shapes identity is by reconnecting us with curiosity. As children, curiosity was central to who we were. We asked questions endlessly, explored, and experimented. By embracing learning later in life, we reconnect with that childlike sense of wonder. It becomes part of our identity again, reminding us that curiosity doesn't belong only to the young. It belongs to anyone willing to ask, "What's next?" I've also noticed that learning brings a sense of pride and confidence that seeps into how we see ourselves. When I successfully mastered a recipe or figured out a new feature on my phone, I felt proud not just of the accomplishment but of myself. That pride became part of my identity, an inner reminder that I am capable, resilient, and never too old to adapt. Learning can also help us rediscover passions we set aside years ago. I know people who return to painting, writing, or music after decades, and each rediscovery became a core part of who they were in later years. These passions didn't just bring them joy, they gave them an identity beyond their daily routines, something vibrant to look forward to and share with others. Identity in later years is also shaped by the stories we tell ourselves. When we say, "I'm too old for that," we shrink our identity. But when we say, "I'm still learning," we expand it. Each new skill, no matter how simple, becomes a declaration of growth. I often tell myself I am still becoming, and that phrase has reshaped how I see myself and my place in the world. Ultimately, learning shapes our identity in later years by keeping us open, adaptable, and alive. It reminds us that we are not finished products but ongoing stories. Each lesson we take on becomes a new chapter, and together, those chapters tell a story of resilience, growth, and endless possibility. So often we hear people say, "I wish I had done this earlier." That phrase carries regret, as if opportunities disappear once a certain age is reached. But the truth is, it is never too late to start. Whether you are 60, 70, 80, or even older, every new day is a chance to begin something fresh. Time may change the pace at which we learn, but it never cancels our ability to grow. I remember meeting a man who began painting at the age of 85. He had never touched a brush before, but once he started, he couldn't stop. His family hung his colorful canvases all over their home, and his newfound passion brought him recognition in his community. Imagine if he had told himself it was too late. He would have missed years of joy that were waiting for him. The same is true for smaller things, like learning to use a smartphone, picking up a new language, or simply trying a new recipe. None of these require youth, only willingness. Every attempt we make, even if imperfect, adds vitality to our lives. Instead of measuring how long it took us to start, we can celebrate that we started at all. There's also a kind of courage in beginning late in life. It takes humility to be a beginner again when the world expects us to be settled in our ways. That humility is a strength, not a weakness. It shows that we are still open to the unknown, still daring to step outside our comfort zones. And with that courage comes the reward of growth and discovery. One of the most powerful reminders I've carried with me is that age does not define potential. Yes, our bodies may slow down, but our minds, our creativity, and our capacity for joy remain rich with possibility. Learning at an older age is not about catching up. It's about enriching the present moment and making the most of the years we have now. I have also noticed that when older adults take on something new, it inspires others. Grandchildren see it and think, "If Grandma can do it, so can I." Friends witness it and feel encouraged to step out of their own routines. Every time we prove that it's not too late, we remind others that growth has no expiration date. Perhaps the most comforting part of this reminder is that it removes the weight of regret. Instead of looking back and wishing, we can look forward and acting. We don't have to be haunted by what we didn't do. We can be excited about what we are about to do next. The future, no matter how many years remain, is always open to us. In the end, the message is simple but profound. It's never too late to learn, to try, to begin again. Life keeps offering us doors to open, and each one we step through adds depth to our story. Let this be a gentle reminder to all of us. The best time to start may have been yesterday, but the second best time is today.